welcome once again to our week, and it's Caroline Stevens, of course, and we have a shock for the nations because, well, something's happened. The sun came out, and she's done it again. She spends all the time in the sun, and she's got no flowers. She's not been able to go to the supermarket to buy flowers. She's not got any necklace, but it's still her. Welcome, Caroline.
Oh, thank you, Rodney. Yes, I have been out in the garden digging and using the sun lounger and then digging some more. But when you've got to have a rest sometime.
And you fell asleep in the sun.
I thought my face could weather it. The rest of my body could weather it with no suntan lotion, dare I say it. What did we used to do before we had suntan lotion?
Some people madly put on olive oil, which made them cook.
I wasn't going to do that. No, so there we go. So at least my eyes are sort of coming back down to normal. You wouldn't allow me to wear my sunglasses for the show.
Listen, they look like two dustbin lids. I mean, you couldn't see anything of you.
It could have been anybody, couldn't it? Anyway, when you say about who we are and masking our faces, let's talk about the fact that only a few months ago people were really concerned about the Muslim faith wearing the burqas and all the head face coverings. And what do we see now but so many people wearing masks that are like this?
We've all turned into Muslims, have we then?
Well, and if they don't have these masks, they start wrapping around scarves around their faces. So all I'm seeing now is, with some people, just a pair of eyes, which is what we were complaining about before, wasn't it?
Yes, bizarre, isn't it? And they can't make up their mind about masks. You get a different story from every country. And you can't, cannot the government get enough masks? Are they making an excuse? It doesn't make any difference. Well, we wear them occasionally, especially in supermarkets in Portugal. And it's not comfortable. You feel as though you're suffocating. And is it doing any good?
Well, there was a question, wasn't there, on the Prime Minister's weekly evening show, even not weekly show, evening show. And somebody had said, well, if the mask doesn't prevent you getting coronavirus.
Well, guard some people if you've got it before you've got the symptoms. That's the wisdom of science at the moment. But there are masks and masks, and if you buy a very expensive one, it's a lot better than a very thin one. In fact, they're now saying bandanas and scarves are better than the masks you buy from the average pharmacy, the average chemist. They're giving them out free here in Portugal from town halls. You'd not get that in Britain.
Apparently, they were saying it was very selfish of people to be wearing masks when our medical people didn't have their appropriate PPE. Surely these masks should be being diverted to the people who really are on the front line.
Well, indeed, but that's putting the cart before the horse. It should have been there. The actual obtaining of any equipment has been lamentable, especially in the UK. I say especially, it's happened in other countries, but it seems to be the organisation of it. The army behind the scenes have actually stepped in and said, look, we're specialists in getting provisions everywhere in the world. We can do this job. Civil servants, back off. Let us get on with it. And since they've been allowed, things have got better.
You reckon? Okay, well, talk about civil servants then. That could run very neatly into Dominic Cummings.
Now, you don't like Dominic Cummings, do you?
I used to work for Dominic Cummings, actually. You
survived.
And I survived, yes, in one piece. So Dominic Cummings, he isn't classed as a civil servant. He's classed as a spad. What is a spad, Rodney?
Tell me.
A special advisor. So he's one of Boris Johnson's special advisors. Going back to October 2019, he was some sort of advisor for a privatized health company called Babylon Health. And now we got this special advisor involved in these SAGE meetings.
Yeah, that's been made a lot of by various sections of the press. It's not unusual for a government special advisor to attend meetings that are sort of semi-classified or even classified, because the Prime Minister has to get advice. It happens to be Dominic Cummings, who's not made a bad effort in the past, some people think. Although don't forget, he's probably got coronavirus from Boris.
Well, did Boris Johnson have coronavirus? When you consider that there's supposed to be an official test as such, then, well, is there really a proper test when you're considering all the deaths are being put down as CV-19? People with heart attacks, people with cancer. This is coming from the nursing fraternity. All deaths have been put down as CV-19. It could just be flu and you would be put down as CV-19.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. I think it's diabolical what's been going on. That together with, forget the old people's homes, don't put those in the figures. And we have the cheek to criticize Russia, even China, who are blatantly telling porcupines. We're telling our own porcupines, but we're better at it.
Well, that's true. I mean, you've just uncovered an article before we came on air today, how Obama was involved, or the USA, let's just say the USA was involved in funding the Wuhan laboratory. And now we've got the Chinese saying, oh, I think Australia's taken them to task now, and because of all the loss of trade. But the Chinese say, well, this is a political witch hunt, surely.
Yeah, I mean, it's about 3.8 million that Mr. Obama gave to Wuhan. Now, it is absolutely 95%, let's be a bit more accurate, that the thing did escape from that laboratory. Out of the virus, because it's revealing all sorts of things, comes the fact of educating our children. And provision had been made for homeschooling, in effect, which has come in for a lot of flack recently. Golly, it's come back to haunt us. It's a good thing now to be homeschooled. But I'll tell you what, less than half the parents in the United Kingdom have even bothered. That is dreadful.
Well, I'm smiling here because I've still got a child at school, but that child is, how can I put it, of a certain age where they're just interacting with their tutor as and when, because of the nature of their studies. So they're not doing 6 different lessons a day. So I'm sat here smiling because, you know, I'm a qualified maths teacher, and I just remember what it was like teaching children, I should say. And to think that they're talking about not sending schools, well, not opening schools back now until September. Can you imagine the sort of job teachers are going to have in September teaching children who could have been effectively on holiday since, towards the end of March? April, May, June, July, August, almost half a year without official education. Can you imagine just what an uphill struggle that might be?
Well, pity it didn't happen when we were at school. We'd have loved that sort of holiday, wouldn't we? But there you go. Now, another important event this week again, some breaking news. Germany have decided, a lot of big companies, that they've got to tie, to get up out of the coronavirus financial problem, they're going to tie the Greens with the companies, and the monies available for getting out of the lockdown, they're not going to make it available to companies who say, we don't want to know anything about green things, it should be put on the shelf. This coronavirus has cost the world a fortune. The last thing we want at the moment is to spend a double fortune on green things and carbon footprints. It seems a bit of madness, this.
Well, we knew that the Pope was supposed to be meeting all the leaders in May to discuss climate change. And we knew that we were going to have the COP26, the COP26 conference in Glasgow in November. And that was based on climate change. In fact, it was supposed to be Claire Perry that was leading that. And there was a bit of a debacle earlier on in the year. So we were conscious that part of the UN Agenda 2030 was always going to be about more taxation and more about environmental issues. So they're just nibbling at all these different corners. And, you know, that is going to be part and parcel. We've already had the World Health Organization talking about our the people paying 10% extra in tax to pay for climate change.
Yes, indeed we have. I mean, it is, in my humble opinion, absolute nonsense. We're broke, or we're being told we're broke and all the nations are broke, and they want to double the brokenness. It's just, well, the fact is we have coronavirus with us. It's real, it's killing people. Now, the science, what anybody says, is not decided about the carbon footprint and whether carbon dioxide does any problems for us. It's cyclical, many scientists are saying. So it's not proven. Coronavirus has been proven. Come on, get a grip. And when you tie this, and you'll like this, Caroline, with HS2, they're going to go ahead still with HS2. Are we living in mad times and in mad countries?
HS2, wow. Well, I'm sure you've watched The Hunger Games and To Kill a Mockingjay. They've been showing those films back to back on, Freeview in the UK over the past few weeks. This is what HS2 is all about. It's about the superfast train and being able to take people from north to south in double quick time, taking people's property off them. And of course, now those properties are not going to be worth very much. And what's the purpose of this? With potentially unemployment could reach 50%. Who's going to be able to afford these trains? But it's still going ahead. And, you know, we've got people talk about FEMA camps. Were you aware that America is actually broken down into 10 FEMA regions? So this is, what does FEMA stand for? I do not actually know what FEMA stands for. But this, you know, we are broken down into 12 regions in the UK, just like the Hunger Games. And you can just see that, you know, we've got food scarcity on the horizon. You have to look at America. I think we've discussed this before. In the past week, since our last interview, we are now having meat processing plants at 15% less capacity. They're culling animals left, right, and centre. Pork, chicken, beef. A lot of these animals are just being euthanized. You know, we've talked about euthanasia of people, taking them to Switzerland. Is it right to do so? Well, isn't it a crying shame that we've got this pandemic and we are now euthanizing animals? So this is moving very nicely into the people of the world being subjected to Frankenstein foods.
Well, that's another issue, but again, it's going to cost money to solve it. But you mentioned there that it will take a train from London Euston to Manchester, an example, in double quick time. No, it won't. It'll take 20 minutes off the journey. And actually, businessmen who make this trip are actually kicking off at the moment, saying that such is the value of the internet while traveling now on those trains. They'd sooner be on the train 20 minutes longer so they can complete all their emails. I mean, for 20 minutes, it is crackers.
Well, I think the CV-19 virus, or whatever it is, it has highlighted the fact that many more people can have meetings using Skype. They do not need to be face to face, do they?
Well, no, it's brought some common sense into the picture. A lot of the ladies are now saying that they would prefer to be at home, even though the kids do get on under their feet. They're still there with the kids, so adopting the traditional role.
You just dropped that subtly in. Actually, I think it's going to have a polarizing effect. It's going to have some families being brought closer together. I've known people who were separating, they were living in separate places, and because of the financial constraints, they're basically giving their marriages a second chance because they have no alternative.
Well, there is an alternative. We've got some figures. It actually came through yesterday that now the pubs are shut, there's less drunkenness, less stealing, less crime. My goodness me. But it's transferred to the house, and Mrs. and Mr. are knocking holes out of each other.
As I said to you, it's a polarizing effect, and especially when the weather's been good, if families have been able to get out and about, even if they're just going out one at a time, then that's given people a reason for being back in the same house, isn't it? There's a few more communal meals, I reckon, and because you can't eat out so much, you're very limited on your takeaways. You are now having people working in the kitchen together, even if they're making their separate meals. They're probably here together.
Yeah,
they're out in the garden together. And do you know what I think? You know, before we had a breakdown in communications, breakdown in society in the UK, especially because of the referendum. It was very much a polarizing situation, the Leavers versus the Remainers. Well, now we've got, I think the polarizing situation could be either key workers against the rest, or it could be those people with a garden against those who have not got a garden.
Well, that's a good description. Yes. From there, I'm going to swiftly move on to chlorinated chickens. Now, behind the scenes again, I understand there's a deal being done because we need America perhaps more than we've ever done, because already they're coming out in certain states of the lockdown, even though their figures are very high. Certain communities are very low or zero, and they are letting them go into normality very quickly. But the Americans are taking, if you wish, advantage of this when they're dealing with Britain. Look, Britain, you're going to need us. The trade deal is yours on condition that you accept the chickens. And everybody goes mad about chlorinated chickens. Well, they're not putting much chlorine in the chickens. And we reply, oh, our food standards are higher than yours. They're not. They're nowhere near what America have. Now, if America are allowing certain chlorine to kill the germs in chickens, there's a good reason for it. We're making a lot out of this, perhaps.
It's a many-faceted situation. We're talking about lots and lots of chickens now being culled in America. So I'm not so sure that there will be that much to export now that we've got this food scarcity on the horizon, because we're finding that a lot of nations are closing their borders to food exports. So we've got, for example, Russia has closed its borders to exporting wheat. So whether America will actually still be exporting chicken, what I do know is that Liam Fox and our wonderful British government have been signing up to trade deals to export our pork, our beef, and of course we do have very, very high standards in the UK. We've been committed, presumably now, to exporting these foods to both China, Saudi Arabia, and the USA. So those three countries. So we've signed these trade deals. Does that mean that our farmers will turn around and say, oh, we're not going to supply these countries and we're going to supply our own people instead? What will the British government do? Because they've signed the trade deal in the same way, I guess, as Russia signs trade deals, and Russia's keeping their wheat to themselves, in the same way as Vietnam, and I think Russia again, and is it Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan? These countries are not going to be exporting rice anymore. And what do I see at the supermarket last few days? But empty rice shelves again. And flour in the lockdown situation we've only seen in the local Lidls in over 5 weeks now. I've only seen 2 days where we've had plain and self-raising flour. So you've got to read and think, well, the chlorinated chicken, at the minute, we'd be lucky in a year's time if we're going to be eating any chicken whatsoever. This Frankenfood, they want to push cockroach foods down us. That's the truth of the matter. If they're killing all these, that's why we see these programs on television. They've been telling us, oh, in a few years' time, we're going to be eating insects. That's what. Yes. Why do you think we're going Celebrity Big Brother and celebrities in the jungle?
Yeah, you're not coming out against culling cockroaches, I do hope. Probably she is. We move on further. Scandal. And it is a scandal that's coming through now on the news eventually, that Brits are not allowed to pick fruit. You know that especially in East Anglia, the farmers have been going potty. We're going to go out of business. The crops will be left rotted in the field. Bring in the Romanians by aeroplane, not being tested as they should be. And behind the scenes, Britain is phoning up a lot of people saying, we are willing to work in the fields, and they can't get through. They're being ignored. What is going on?
Well, I wish I knew, actually, because there are so many diverging opinions and comments about this. There was some article a couple of days ago which said Britons who are on the furlough scheme should be out picking fruit. And as far as I'm aware, there are lots of Britons that do want to volunteer. But then you've got the farmers allegedly paying for flights to bring the Romanians in. And of course, we've got this 90% of the world's countries are actually quarantining people as they come in, testing people. They have some sort of restriction when those people go into their countries. UK has no restriction whatsoever. So you could fly in from Iraq, you could then jump on a tube, and
it's spreading everywhere. No, you're right. I mean, the crazy thing again happened this weekend, that Britain decided it was going to take the temperature of people getting off an aeroplane. What, after 2.5 months? And it's not going to do it now. It's going to do it in another month. So we'll have a quarter of the year, a bit more, when we've not even got round with our bureaucracy to take temperatures and find out whether they're infected. And in case you think I'm anti-British, I'm not. I'm very pro-British. We're in Portugal, and Portugal have really clamped down, and there's very little coronavirus here. But they have just taken 300 illegal immigrants in through Lisbon, and they've put them in flats, and they're full of coronavirus because they intermingle, close communities, and these are people not to help out, and 95% of them not under any suppression anywhere. They're coming in with their mobile phones, They're teenagers, goodness knows. Well, we know where they're from, mainly Africa. And it's introducing the virus to Portugal, who have a very low count. I suspect, again behind the scenes, this is Europe. Have you met your quota for immigration?
Well, that's right. They were wanting every country to take their quota. And of course, we haven't actually officially left the European Union. This has all been, dare I say it, very convenient for anybody who was wanting to leave the European Union, because it's diverted attention from the fact that actually we're still part of it, whatever anybody says. We are in the transition period. So if the EU is just a wing of the United Nations, and the United Nations is basically calling the shots with Bill Gates.
Yeah, and your estimate, is it going to be extended? Is this the perfect excuse, the virus, that they're going to put it off for another year?
Supposed to be totally out, aren't we, at the end of this December? Are they going to be talking trade? Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a case of they're going to easily be able to kick the can into the long grass, and we'll still be in the EU by the end of this year, without a shadow of a doubt.
Finally, we move on. Time has gone again. A lot of car hire companies and insurance companies and airlines are being heavily criticised at the moment. Let's take insurance as an example. There's no cars on the road compared with before. We're not driving. Some of us have left the cars in the garage for months, and we're still being charged insurance premiums. What's that about? The insurance company should be made to return.
Oh gosh, I think in the big scheme of things, I guess you could talk about the council tax. Council tax bills are worth more than, that's more costly, isn't it? The council tax than car insurance for a lot of people. So why don't we start with the council tax? Remember, it's the councils. They're the ones who are implementing UN Agenda 2030. So really, that's the first port of call, which we should be saying, well, why are we paying council tax for tips? For the tips, they're not open. The tips are not open. You know, there's a lot of people being out in their gardens at the minute, and what we're supposed to do with our rubbish? Where do we take it? So while we're paying council tax of some incredibly high rate, it's absolutely extortionate. It's far more, the council tax is far more than the car insurance. What I do see, though, is the UN, if this keeps going on now, the UN Agenda 2030, oh, well, they're going to be hitting their targets, aren't they? They want most of the people out of their cars into public transport. And as you say, you know, a lot of people have a two-car household. If both people are furloughed, or one's a housewife or house husband, do you need two cars anymore? Is there going to be any need to leave the town because the government's saying, well, after lockdown, you can be moving around in your region? What do you mean by region? Does that mean we can't go and see our parents, our aged parents, in another part of the country? This is just criminal.
Well, this afternoon I have a recording with David Curtin, who's AM in the Assembly in London. He's specifically written a very, very good article on this, how much control there is, and we'll discuss it next time. Time has gone, and don't go in the garden. You're allowed to dig your carrots, because some people have said very unkindly that you look the same colour as your carrots, but you can go and dig them.
Oh, thank you. It'll take a little while for them to grow. They're only like this high at the minute, and it's not sunny.
Have you got your sand, though? Everybody's saying, has she got her sand for the carrots?
Well, that's a good point. I did get the sand, 6 bags, and I had to travel 20 miles to find the nearest sand supplier, and they're now completely out of stock, having sold me 6 wet bags of sand. Yet I go into a shop this morning, they don't have the right seeds. This is Wilco's now. And I say, well, can you give me the telephone numbers of your local branches, which are, again, the next ones are about 15 miles away. Oh, we're not sure we can give you that. I said, what do you mean? You can't give me the telephone numbers of your local branch. Oh, well, we don't want you traveling out of town. Who's it? What business is it of this?
It's happening. We never thought that 1984 would be here so soon.
Exactly. I said, well, I've got friends in those towns, so they can go and get them. Then they can post them to me. Oh, right, okay, I'll give you the numbers then. And I just thought, well, there is obviously no coordination. You could just jump in your car. You will be in that car on your own. You'll get to the next town and you'll park up just like you would have done in your own town, and you won't be anywhere near 3 meters near anybody else. It is bonkers. This is bonkers, people. Please understand, I'm not stupid.
Well, she's gone off on one now, and one has to agree. It's been great. Thank you, Caroline. As I said, go and get your carrots to send it to, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.